Hey YouTube, what's up? So I don't make these videos very often, but I got something in today that is pretty exciting for me, and I just wanted to share my initial impressions and talk a little bit about what this is. So this is the Sigma 35mm f1.4 in the Sony E mount. This is a new product that just came out from Sigma. There's a whole line of the Sigma art lenses that are coming out with the native Sony E mount, and I was pretty excited to hear about that. So I did previously have a Sigma 18-35, which I loved, and I used adapted to the GH5, but I had a lot of trouble with the adapter, and it frequently sort of cut out, and I wound up getting rid of it. But I absolutely loved the image quality, and so I'm really hoping that this new Sigma native E mount line has the same kind of quality, but also has that native autofocus performance. So I'm going to open this up. I literally haven't opened it up yet. Just see what's inside here. Kind of the standard stuff. Warranty card. A gigantic booklet in many languages. And something else. And then the classic square, really high quality Sigma bag here. So I like this a lot already. This is very similar to the 18-35 actually, with this kind of large bag. And inside we have the lens. So this is the lens. My first reaction is that it is big and heavy. Comes with a lens hood. Man, it looks fantastic. It's actually not that big as I'm taking it out of the bag here. It is not a huge lens. But it is very, very substantial, very, very heavy. I think that's kind of true for all of the Sigma art lenses. Looks great. It's got this, basically this extension on the end of it. So I think I've seen a 35 Sigma art in the Canon EF mount before, and I think it may just be this part of the lens. This is basically an extension. So, manual focus ring, a real life focus ring. Boy, that feels good. And then an autofocus, manual focus switch, and that's it. That's all that's on the lens. So the other thing that's interesting to me is I believe that this is a 67mm lens thread, which is, as it turns out, the same diameter as the Sony FE 85 1.8, which I also have, and so I could share the same filters on this lens. Looks fantastic. So this is the A7III, and this is the FE Zeiss 55mm 1.8. And by way of comparison of size, so obviously this 35mm lens is much, much bigger than this 55mm lens. This is one of the more compact lenses. Sony has a number of compact lenses, but this is a nice, fast 55, incredibly sharp. I love this lens, but nice and compact. So this is heavier by a lot, probably not 2x heavier. So let's see what it looks like on the body here. Line up the spot. Oh, nice and tight. Feels fantastic. Looks great on the camera. Yeah, really nice. So I'll do some testing on this lens and report back on what I find. Okay, so this is shot at 24 frames per second, 1080p, and this is my first test just in the house, kind of walking around to see continuous autofocus. I think this was set to wide just to see if it would lock on. This is relatively low light. It is shot at f1.4 to just make sure that, you know, at a very shallow depth of field that it's going to capture focus. And for me, this is doing a fine job. I don't think it's as good as a Sony native Sony branded lens. The 55 I think does a slightly better job, but not bad. So now I'm outside just kind of walking around. Now for some reason all the rest of these clips I shot at 120 frames per second. Not sure why. I think I just didn't set the camera correctly. I meant to shoot it at 24 because I think 24 may be a slightly harder test of the autofocusing system. I'm not sure if that's true or not. But here, just trying to see if it'll lock onto this tree as I walk back and forth. And you can see it does not do a great job of tracking as I'm moving, but it locks on pretty quickly, once I stop, essentially. So it'll be interesting to see how that works with faces. All right, now here I am in the front yard. Kind of, these are flowers. It seems to me it would be a little harder to focus on this stuff. Again, I'm in wide area, so the camera is choosing what it wants to focus on. I think it did a good job there. Here I just wanted to see lens flare, but then I realized I had an ND filter on this, so you can kind of ignore this. The flare might be due to the ND filter as well, or the quality of the flare. But generally speaking, this looks really good to me, actually. So I think flare is probably pretty well controlled. Another autofocus test I just really wanted to see. This is a fairly low contrast situation. Wanted to see if it would focus on this stump as I move back and forth, and I think it's doing a pretty good job. I think this is a brighter scene, and so compared to indoors, probably a bit more contrast, certainly more light, and it seems to be doing an okay job of finding focus. So overall, I'm happy with this level of performance. I'm also pretty happy just generally with how the color and contrast looks on the lens. Okay, I don't think too many people are going to use this as a vlogging lens, but just to get a sense of the autofocus capability, whether it's going to lock onto my face, basically, because I'm the only person that's around today. I thought I'd do a little bit of this. And in case you did want to use this as a vlogging lens and want to know what that looks like, well, this is what that looks like. Pretty close up, I think probably too tight for vlogging, but still, this is what it looks like. Okay, so we're in Lightroom, and I wanted to just show a few still images that I captured. I just had a few minutes to walk around outside, so I was out and about, basically just in the neighborhood nearby my house and across the street at the vineyard. So nothing special here. Just wanted to show a few still images, and we can poke around at them and see what they look like. Nothing special about this image. This is just some flowers against a blue sky. This is a different image of flowers against a blue sky. And what I do like is just getting a sense of kind of the depth of field control that you can have at 1.4. So this image was taken at 1.4. And for me, that's what I like. That's really the reason I wanted to get such a giant lens, is to be able to, not just for light gathering, but for depth of field control. So I think this is motion blur here, basically. It looks really sharp to me when I dig into the corners here. So if I'm looking at the edge, yeah, it might soften up just a little bit. It's very hard to tell because there's so much stuff in the foreground and background here. But for me, this is absolutely acceptably sharp. This is just a post on a walking path. And I took this to kind of look to see if there was going to be any chromatic aberration or what kind of these edges were going to look like. I don't see anything here, but it's the center of the frame. So yeah, there's a little bit of purple fringing there that you can see, but boy, it's very well controlled. And this is certainly not the center of the image. It's hard to see here. I don't have too much out of focus, but the bokeh balls are not perfectly round. They are sort of oblong. It looks fine to me, though. It's not too busy, and they're pretty close to round, so it actually looks, for me, it looks fine. I took this image also to kind of look to see if I could pick out any strong chromatic aberration, and I see very little. Maybe right at the tips here you can see a little bit of that purple fringing, but I gotta say, I think it's very, very well under control. And again, all of these images are captured at f1.4. So I think I used an ND here. Oh, no, that's not true. I did not use an ND on any of the still images, right? Okay, here's a picture of the vineyard. I think nothing too special to look at here. Again, just kind of getting a sense. I was probably 15 feet away from these vines on the other side of a fence. So, kind of getting a sense of what the depth of field is at 1.4. Because again, I took this at 1.4. You wouldn't do that, obviously, if you were taking a real landscape photo. But I basically left it at 1.4 the whole time. Okay, so here's another shot. This was just to kind of get a sense of what the sharpness looks like, and again, I'm blown away by it. So I don't see any distortion, I don't see any chromatic aberration, and this is incredibly sharp. And it's, you know, not centered. It's not in the perfect center, but it is certainly probably in the sweet spot of the lens. I took this image though to try to get that off center, to try to see, you know, not right at the edge, but certainly nearby the edge, what the sharpness looks like. And yeah, for me, I think it looks very good. I mean, if you get out here in the corners, you can start to get picky about, you know, whether this is being out of focus or whether this is a lack of sharpness on the lens. But honestly, you know, and this is right at the edge here, so this is very sharp. I don't see any chromatic aberration. So I am extremely pleased, not only with the contrast that I'm getting out of the lens, but the sharpness at the edge and the lack of chromatic aberration. So from where I sit, beautiful images. You do see a little bit of vignetting here, which for still images I have no problems with, and actually for video I like stylistically. Maybe I won't always like it, but if I'm going to be shooting at 1.4, it's likely that a little bit of vignette is not going to bother me. This is the same thing just on the other side of the lens. I just wanted to kind of see here, and for me it's kind of the same result. Very, very sharp. This is 1.4, you know, on the edge of the lens. So that's it. Those are all the still images that I captured just to get a general sense of what this lens is capable of doing. My reaction is fantastic image quality. Really like the 35mm field of view. So, okay, so this feels different. The camera's much closer to me. I tried to reframe it so that I get kind of a similar framing. I was using my GH5 before, so I could look at the screen and figure out if I was reasonably in focus. Right now, I have no idea. I hope that I'm in focus. So I would say for my purposes, the continuous autofocus in video mode works absolutely fine. I think it's a little bit slower than a native lens like the Zeiss 55 1.8 or even the FE 85 1.8 that I also have. Certainly the kit lens, but the kit lens is a much smaller aperture lens. Depth of field is not as shallow as you can get on a lens like this. So I think my main impression after using the lens just for an hour or so is that I love it. I love the lens. I love the 35mm field of view. The depth of focus control is fantastic with the 1.4 aperture. And the lens is incredibly sharp for, at least from my perspective. Certainly for a 1.4, at 1.4, I think it is very, very sharp. Contrast is fantastic. I think lens flare is under control. Great lens. So very, very positive first impression of this first Sigma Art lens with a native E mount that I've been able to get my hands on too. Okay, YouTube, so hopefully that was helpful. Those are my thoughts on the Sigma 35 1.4 in the E mount. I think they've done a great job. I'm looking forward to seeing some reviews and footage from other people and of the other lenses in the line. I've seen a couple of the 50mm 1.4s already on YouTube, and I'm sure there will be others coming soon. So I know these are shipping now. Certainly this focal length from B&H started shipping yesterday, and more to come, I think.